Life Management Science Labs would like to acknowledge that we live and produce this podcast on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people. We'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands of our listeners and our international colleagues. We'd like to pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Sero Boost, the Happiness Science Insights podcast produced by LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. We're champions of life management science, providing structured insights informed by science and inspired by practice on key aspects of conscious living. Each week, we bring you scientific and practical insights on each element with the expert knowledge of professionals in the field. I'm your host, Lu Ngo, coming to your ears from Naarm, Melbourne, Australia. Let's learn together. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Sero Boost. And on this week's episode, we are taking a romance angle on the science of happiness. And we're talking about beyond the grand gestures, savoring everyday happiness in love. And I'm beyond excited to talk to Linda Bloom today about this topic. Linda, L.C.S.W, is a psychotherapist and marriage counselor who teaches relationship workshops. She is the co-author of 4 books, including the best-selling 101 Things I Wish I Knew When I Got Married. Over 100,000 copies sold. She is a regular teacher at Esalen Institute and Kripalu with over 600 blogs on Psychology Today with over 10 million hits and over 100 videos on her YouTube channel. Thanks so much for joining us, Linda.
I'm delighted to be here with you today.
Yeah, and I want to give our audience a little fun fact that before we started the recording, we had your husband, your partner here, with us for a little bit, and I think that it's just so sweet to see both of you together in the room, and it's kind of a testament to the topic that we're going to talk about today, because I'm sure you've got not only your own experience, but also working with so many different people and couples. You're going to have amazing insights to share with us today. So I'm a little curious because, I'm pretty sure there's got to be a reason why you decided to do the work that you did and, wrote such amazing books on this kind of a topic. And I think it's also fun to hear, it's a very catchy title, 101 Things I Wish I Knew When I Got Married. I'm sure our audience would be curious to know more about this particular topic. So why did you choose to do this kind of work, throughout your life and write these kinds of books?
Thank you for asking. There's an old saying that we teach what we need to learn. And there was so much that we didn't know when we first got together. We were both so young. We were still mostly children, that we weren't even adults yet. We were in our early 20s. We were going to college, and we didn't come from families where we had good models of what a healthy, wholesome, romantic partnership looked like. So when we decided to write 101 Things I Wish I Knew When I Got Married, we actually had 300, and we had to narrow it down so it wouldn't be a big, heavy tome. And some people said, I didn't know there were 101 things you could even say about marriage, but there really is a lot that you can say about committed partnership and what is required to have a great one. And we both had ambition. We wanted to have a great one. So one of our signature strengths of both my husband and myself is we're good students. So we found the best teachers we could find, and we learned a lot from them, and we want to pass it on to as many people as we can.
Yeah, amazing. Thanks so much for sharing that story. I love that because, I think, earlier in this particular show, when I first started out hosting this podcast, I was very much single. And, we talked about topics that are kind of like more focused on the personal development side. And now that I'm in a partnership and romantic partnership, I'm kind of curious to learn more about this topic too, and it's kind of perfect timing for me. Not that we're near marriage at any point right now, but I just think it's really good to learn from you. And I'm sure a lot of people in our audience, if they're tuning into the podcast, they are probably at a stage where they want to know more about how to get there in the partnership journey, and probably some people are about to get married and they would love to learn from you. So today's topic is certainly going to be quite close to home, but I think it's such a broad one. So I'm sure there's more to learn from you, and especially Charlie. So hopefully we'll have another one with Charlie to learn from him another angle. And it's just so lovely to hear that you both learned about this together, and you wrote a book of multiple books on it together. So before we go into the podcast and talk more about that topic, let's get to know you a bit better on a personal level. This is the part where we call Have You Met Linda, which is going to get to know you better through some of the things that you love. First of all, I would love to know what your favorite book is.
Do you know, there's a book called The Hero's Journey, and it's written by a woman named Pearson, who was a student of Joseph Campbell. And Joseph Campbell was a student of Jung. And so the archetypal psychology got handed down from some very formidable teachers, but she took a slant on it that was the women, their hero's journey, which is different than the man's hero's journey. The man's hero's journey is about the hero and the villain and rescuing the damsel in success, in distress. The woman's journey is hero, hero, hero. There's no damsel that needs to be rescued. Do you know the participants in the story are all going down their heroic path in their own ways? And that book touched me so much. I'm really into archetypal psychology because it really shows what skills we need to master to be eligible to go on to the next phase of our life, and to be a hero, to be a caregiver, to be a warrior and draw boundaries, to be the wanderer and to individuate, to leave the comfort and security of family, and community, to go out on adventures. And then you can end up being the wise elder. At the end of your journey, you have mastered so many tasks. I learned so much along the way that you can be in the co-creative stage of your life and the co-creative stage in your partnership because you have earned your way in. And that book has always informed my work from the first day that I read that book.
That sounds incredible. I have not heard of that book before, but I was eating up every single word you were saying.
Carol Pearson, The Hero Within. I highly recommend it.
Amazing. Thank you. I'm definitely going to read that. And what about a movie you've enjoyed recently?
I saw this movie most recently called Maestro. And the person who acts in the movie also directed the movie, and he also wrote the script for it. Gifted about a talented conductor, that he just dedicated himself to his art and his craft and had tremendous recognition during his lifetime. And it is a beautiful story, so I recommend Maestro.
Thank you. I've also not watched that yet, so I'm going to put that on my list to watch.
It's his best part. I think he's good in everything he's in, but he's especially excellent in this one.
Amazing. Great to hear. I'm definitely going to put that on the list. And I'm not sure if you are a podcast listener yourself. A lot of our podcast guests are actually not podcast listeners. If you are a podcast listener, which show is your favorite?
I would recommend my own shows because we pack a lot of value in those podcasts. Do you know we have a YouTube channel and it's got a large number on them. And so we go through all kinds of issues. Of course, we do the end to arguing about our most recent book, but we also talk a lot about happiness in our podcasts and what a really happy life is composed of. And so I think there's a lot of value for people who are into getting a lot of educational material from our podcasts, practical, user-friendly information there.
Great. Thank you for sharing about your show. I actually, I saw that you have a lot of videos, but I didn't know that you have a podcast for those ones as well. So that's great to know, and we'll definitely have a listen. Thank you for that. I would love to know now about your role model. I'm not sure if you have like a particular role model in life, or maybe multiple role models that you look up to, or perhaps you don't have one. What kind of trainer are you on?
You know, when I first decided that I was going to teach seminars, I was so frightened to do it because I'm a recovering shy person. People who meet me now don't know how withheld and frightened person that I was. I intentionally went to workshops that were facilitated by a couple because I wanted to teach with my husband. And so I went to workshops that were conducted by Barry and Joyce Vassell, and also Stephen and Andrea Levine. And I saw that it can look so many different ways. But the reason that these two couples ended up being role models for me in a very profound and powerful way is they were willing to expose their own personal journey. They weren't just talking heads about the theory and what you need to do is. They talked about what they had learned in the trenches of relationship. And I feel like those two couples gave me their blessing. It's okay to talk about the dark times that you went through when you were confused and didn't have a clue about what to do in your relationship. And so we always tell before and after stories when we teach. And it seems to inspire our students. They think, oh gosh, they were so screwed up. And look how happy they are now. We can do at least that well.
I love that. That sounds, it sounds realistic. And, I'm glad that you share that you have such role models to sort of look up to and learn from, because a lot of the times we kind of think that, you probably just, you were born this way. You're just so great at it. And actually, no, it sounds like you also learned a lot from your own experience and learn from these people that you just talked about. I can't remember the name off the top of my head. But it's just great to hear that you've got inspiration for your work. And, that's why we know that it has a lot of different perspectives. And finally, in this part, I would love to ask you about something that you've learned that has been super impactful on you. This could be a course that you've taken recently, or could be a course you took a long time ago, but you still remember.
Mm-hmm. I did the LifeSpring trainings in midlife. I was 40 at the time. I still had young kids at home. And it was extremely transformative to me to realize in that training the power of intention and commitment. I felt that I was strong in commitment, and other areas not so strong. But commitment, but I had that kind of dogged determination, and I really got it when I did the basic course, the advanced course, and then I took the leadership course that they offered. Mm-hmm. And intentionality and commitment was a theme that ran through all of the courses. And the realization that I had, if something was really important to me, I could declare it, I could vision it, I could get help, I could ask for assistance, to tool up on the skill set that I would need to accomplish my goal. But it's that dogged determination for the things that are most important to us. And that has been a guiding light through my career.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you. And I love that you talked about the fact that you took this course when you were 40, or in your 40s. It seems like you've been learning throughout your lives and continuously improving the knowledge on different areas. Especially, it's kind of closely related to your work. And most importantly, all your answers are very on theme. So, that's been great to hear. And now let's talk about today's topic, beyond the grand gestures, savoring everyday happiness and love. I think you're the perfect person to talk to us about such a topic, especially given, the story that you told us about you and Charlie is just amazing and heartwarming. And you also mentioned that in your podcast, you kind of talk about happiness too. So let's start with happiness, because that's what the show is about. So Linda, what does happiness mean to you?
I think a lot of people have the wrong idea about happiness and they think it's a high. I don't really see it that way. I think it's a deep. It's a deep felt sense of well-being. I'm enough. It's an abundant universe. There's enough money. There's enough challenge. There's enough support. And it's that felt sense that I have what it takes to accomplish the goals of my life. And of course, we need a lot of support from other people. And it's very important that we're bold and assertive about going after the support that we need, be it from mentors, family, friends, books, authors, videos, podcasts, that we avail ourselves of the support that's out there, but to trust into and really have that living, alive sense that I can do what I want to do that's going to give my life meaning and purpose.
Thank you for your answer, Linda. I think I've heard so many definitions on this show. And, with yours, I really love that you at the beginning mentioned, that the word deep, it's different from high. And, I couldn't agree more with a deep sense of well-being. And, I think in the later part of your answer, you mentioned something that we all want to kind of achieve in our lives, right? And we slowly work towards that and we find out about it as we go along in life. I think it's definitely quite challenging because for young people like myself, I think it's been eye-opening to just like accumulate a little bits of information every year to just find out what exactly we want to achieve out of our lives. And so to hear from someone like you with years of experience and especially doing the work that is so interrelated with your life, it's super inspiring. And so I can see that you're living your definition of happiness, as far as I know from our short interaction today. I would also love to hear from you about your understanding or your observation of people's misconceptions when it comes to happiness.
Yes, when they're misinterpreting where real happiness comes from, they're going down the wrong path.
Yeah.
And many cultures are so materialistic that it gives the people the impression that if I achieve in my career, if I amass a bunch of wealth, that's going to bring me happiness. They may even say, I know money doesn't bring you happiness, but they're not living that way. Do you know where they're giving their best energy, their time and attention is to their work, earning degrees and getting all kinds of training. And I do think that part of our happiness comes from having right livelihood and work that really fulfills us. But all of the people that I respect in the positive psychology movement say the very same thing. You get the biggest bang for your buck in the happiness department from your closest relationships. How many people do you have in your life who you feel are close friends, confidants, people you can count on, people you can have a great time with, people you can have adventures with, people who you can learn with? People you can have fun with? Those people who have authentic relationships, fulfilling relationships, they're going to hit the jackpot in the happiness department. And those people who are trying to get their definition of success as the money, power, and influence, it's not about that status. It's about the heart connections with the people who are important to us that really make the big difference.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I think it is something that we're probably aware of, most of us. but I think living it is harder. Just like you were saying, a lot of people say that, oh, like money is not everything, but we still fall into that trap of, oh, we need more money. We need to accumulate more wealth in our lives to be happy. And a lot of people feel trapped. So it kind of depends on different situations. For example, I have one of my friends who kind of talks about the fact that, they are strapped for money and they kind of need it for certain things that they want to achieve in their lives, and they don't want to be dependent on anyone or anything for that. And so for them, it's super important for them to be financially free. And so there's a period of time where they're caught up in that and they kind of really need to work on it, but it's for a reason. I think the most important thing is to not get it, let it carry you away. Because, for some people, it's actually the most important thing at this particular moment to make more money. And that's fair. But, it's not something that we should focus on throughout our lives. It depends on the different stages of lives.
And whatever stage of life we're in, even in the career building stage, not to get so obsessed with it, not to overcommit to that part of our life to the exclusion of our relationships. We mustn't neglect them.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is a cornerstone of our teaching. When we teach at Esalen and Kripalu, we make a big deal out of this because in midlife, my husband and I almost gave our relationship up. We came very close to calling it quits. It was all but called the divorce lawyer for me because I was so unhappy because he was so in career building mode. He was a corporate guy. He was working 80 hours a week. He was waking up in hotels and cities. He didn't even know what city he was in. Do you know, he was completely obsessed for a while. And I had 3 little kids at the time. And we had made a contract with each other that we were going to bring these kids up together and mutually support each other's career development. And he's missing in action. And I was very, very unhappy. I missed him terribly. And it was a marked demarcation from the life that we had had before he was a corporate guy. Because for 12 years, we did really very well before he was a corporate guy. So we try to drive this idea home when we speak with people is be responsible about your job. Pick work that you like. Definitely commit yourself to it, but make sure to take good care of your relationships while you're doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And, thank you for being open and honest about the struggle that you had with your relationship a long time ago. I'm sure even though it has been a while, it still reminds you of, things that we can work on. And that's probably imparted in the lessons that you teach people and in your writing, I'm sure. And that's kind of on topic for today in a way, because, relationships are really hard to navigate. And as you rightfully said, relationships are super important to our happiness. And yet it's hard for us to navigate relationships, especially romantic relationships. And I can tell you, same for me. I'm nowhere near your, the journey that you've had in your relationship with Charlie. But I think at the very beginning of my relationship, I had, a lot of struggle as well. And it's kind of, it was this battle of, oh, I feel happy, but not really, because I'm trying to navigate this, these challenges that I'd never known before because I was so used to being single. And it's quite similar to what you just shared. What are we going to focus on? Because right now we are, focusing on building our relationship, but we don't have a lot of time because we have, different priorities, work and, other things that we need to take care of. And so it's this constant battle of, how do we make this work? And we have priorities that are probably going to be shifting in the future as well. So learning to work as a team and, learning the core lessons of relationship would be really key to this. And I think today's topic about grand gestures and, small things would really help with this, because what I have noticed is, in relationships, especially in the early stage, I am not sure about the later stages in relationship, and that's where I'm going to count on your expertise and experience. But in the early stage of relationships, a lot of us expect grand gestures. and probably in the later stage of relationships too. I'm not entirely sure about that. And we perhaps forget about the fact that, it doesn't have to be such big things, because relationships are meant to be for a long time and you need to look at the long term. But we kind of don't really know how to distinguish between the grand gestures and the little things every day that count. So in your experience, what would actually count as grand gestures? Because, sometimes there are small things that are actually grand gestures depending on the context, and vice versa.
So thank you for asking. There's some milestones. Do you know when a couple decides we're going to move in together? It's grand. When the engagement ring is bought, when the proposal happens for the wedding and the actual wedding ceremony, when the house is bought, when you stop using birth control and you decide you're going to be parents together. These are the grand milestones. It's sometimes a big trip like the honeymoon or other trips. Do you know, world travel? They're expensive. They're time consuming. They take a lot of organizing. And I think they're all wonderful. They're beautiful. But what I have learned is it's the tiny little things every day that really matter. The first thing my husband hears when he wakes up in the morning is, "Good morning, my love." Do you know, it's a nice way to start the day. We have cuddling meditation in the morning. Sometimes it's still dark out, and before I even get up out of the bed, I'm having a great day. Do you know, because we're connected to each other with skin to skin. And then the good night kiss, the kiss before the person goes off to work, the taking a moment before the meal to hold hands. Maybe you say gratitude for something about the day or gratitude about your partner. These little things mean so much. They really add up. And the couples who put their relationship on cruise control don't have very many of these small gestures that mean so much. And their cruise control can just veer them right off the road and over an embankment if they don't wake up in time. And so we're always talking to our students and our clients and our readership about be intentional and committed, about sincere appreciation and gratitude, and the little gestures that mean so much. Cooking the meal that they like, picking your dishes up from the table and take them to the sink. All these things, putting the dishes in the dishwasher, folding the laundry, all of these things make the other person's life just a little easier. Do you know, there's so many responsibilities we have to take care of. And if we lighten their load, they feel it. And they feel gratitude for our being in their life. And not the least of which is being patient and being a good listener and working with our irritability to clear it. If they do something or they don't do something, or they say something or they don't say something that annoys us, that if we can clear it and let it go, we don't have to talk to them about it. That spares them. And when we become very highly skilled in managing differences, we bring the aggravation level down and we bring the appreciation level up. So there's less fighting and better sex. So there's a lot of payoffs in these little tiny gestures mean so much.
And they contribute to our overall happiness, right? Because that's exactly what you were talking about at the beginning.
Not just happiness. Of course, happiness is wonderful, but health. The researchers show that the love cocktail that is going through our bloodstream with all the endorphins and the oxytocin that's adding to people's health and well-being, not premature aging, less cancer, less heart disease, less hospitalizations, less medication. When you go into a hospitalization, less time in the hospital. So this health and longevity benefit is tremendous from all of these little daily gestures.
Absolutely. I mean, it's so clear that these little things can add up and have a ripple effect. And while we think that they are little things, they're actually not so little, right? Because they're contributing to our overall, like you were saying, well-being, health, happiness, and so many other things. I don't mean to be cheesy, but I do think that the little things add up in another way, which is sort of like when you're going through a really, really tough time and you have your partner there with you and you just, enjoying the little things together, you sort of find yourself a bit more resilient, a bit more positive. And that's what kind of what I've noticed in myself personally. And I wonder if that's the case with others.
It is the case. And I think you nailed it. I use the term deposits in karma savings and loan. Do you know you build up a big account? And when you go through a rough time, maybe you have a health problem, maybe you get sick, maybe you lose your job, you got downsized out of your job, maybe one of the people in the family is going through something or one of your kids. When you have a rough spot, maybe it's a rough spot in your relationship that you have a irreconcilable difference that's really giving you a hard time. You have an abundant account to draw on. So each one of these, sometimes people think they're trivial. I don't consider them to be trivial. I consider them all to be profound. Each one of these sweet things that we do, if they love blueberries when you're in the market, if you don't like blueberries, but you pick them up for them, it gives them a little joy jolt, a little pick me up. Each one of these gestures is a deposit in karma savings and loan. And then if you have some kind of difficulty or challenge, you've got an abundant account. You're not going to go in the red.
Absolutely. I think that's such a great tip. And it probably allows a lot of people to rethink how they're approaching, their relationship right now. Because I would say for a lot of us, it's something that people are, I think they're kind of two trained, as I've noticed in myself and my friends. A lot of people are just always in relationships. And a lot of people are kind of picky when it comes to relationship. And in fact, a lot of my friends are still single, in their late 20s, early 30s. And sometimes when people are in relationships throughout their 20s, let's say, or, ever since they start high school and they start dating, they're never single. They probably don't really pay attention to how meaningful that can be. When you're in a relationship, you appreciate it and you actually work on it and notice and appreciate the little things. It has this amazing benefit, just like what you're saying from a scientific perspective. And on the contrary, sometimes a lot of people are kind of saying, like my friends are kind of like, oh yeah, I'm hesitant about being this open or having all these commitments in relationship. It feels a little bit too overwhelming. It could be, there could be so many different traits that people are on, because depending on the different stages of relationship or their view on relationships. And here we're kind of having a conversation with the pretext that, this is probably for people that are already in relationship. But it could actually help people that are not in relationship yet as well, to know that, once you're in a relationship, these are the things you should pay attention to, right? The little things, they add up.
Absolutely. And it isn't just our romantic partnership. It's our relationships with all the people who are important to us. That applies to our friends and family members. Sometimes I call the close friends the family of choice. Do you know that it does count? When you're talking about the reluctance and the reticence, ambivalence of some of your young friends, if they're scared about how big romantic partnership, committed partnership is, they're awake. Some people think, we'll just love each other and everything will flow from there. And that is a myth. Do you know? Even if you have the burning bush experience where it's so obvious that you fall strongly for this person and they may have a real strong falling in love with you too, you still have work to do, because that infatuation is going to wear off. And when the relationship matures, you look over at the other person, you realize you've been a bit drugged with all of those tricks that Mother Nature puts on us to keep the species going. And when that does wear off, some people get months out of that, even a year out of the infatuation stage where you're a little nutty, infatuated with the other person. But everybody has to leave the Garden of Eden eventually. And then you get down to the mature work of who am I with? And who am I going to be in this relationship? Am I going to be able to be vulnerable with them? Am I going to be able to create a safe context so that they feel that they can be vulnerable with me? And we will show each other our innermost self, our fears, our grand, wild visions for our life, our feelings of insecurity, our magnificent failures and the mistakes that we feel we've made in the past, that they will be one of the very few, maybe the only, but certainly the elite group that we will show our innermost self to. And that's an edge to play. That's definitely getting out there on the skinny branches. It's an adventure. We sometimes refer to the term psychonaut. The astronauts go out in space and the psychonauts go in. They go into our feelings and needs. And when they find who they are and what's true, they're willing to, with the select few, reveal that truth to them. And I think it's the most exciting game around, but it's not everybody's cup of tea. And for some people, it's kind of an acquired taste. But all of the people that I know who have the exemplary relationships, I sometimes call them the Olympic athletes relationship. I sometimes call them the blue ribbon, relationships. They all have the courage to get vulnerable with each other and expose their inner life to each other. And they all have worked out this exquisite dance, this delicate balance of your needs are not more important than mine, and they're not less important than mine. And they're recalibrating all the time to keep that delicate balance in good shape. Now, it's a lot of work to do that. You have to be very tuned into yourself and check in regularly with your partner, and they need to be tuned into themselves and willing to reveal their inner experience. And we tell people at least once a week, have a meaningful check-in, and more is better. My husband and I have been doing that on a daily basis for years. We wouldn't let any issues lay around incomplete. We handle them right away. And we check in with each other regularly. And all the couples whose relationship we admire, these Olympic athletes, they're doing that on a regular basis.
Incredible. I love that. It's hilarious that you have all these different names for the different people in relationships too. I think it's really relatable for a lot of us. And you mentioned something that I find to be extremely interesting at this stage, where a lot of people when they start dating, they have a certain view on relationship, and obviously before the dating there's the chasing, and then you get into the relationship, and then comes a lot of different other milestones, with the grand gestures that you mentioned, and then comes marriage. And for a lot of my friends, as I can tell you very honestly, a lot of my friends recently got married, and it seems like for some of them, it's like, yep, this is it. Like, I got to the milestone that I always wanted to get to, which is marriage. And I feel like there's a lack of understanding of what marriage actually is. And so maybe this will help them, because you have a whole book on it. And we mentioned that earlier, right? 101 lessons I wish I knew when I got married. I'm sure this will help a lot, especially when it comes to making love last and keeping in mind the little things. And it's definitely going to be more work. It's not going to be like, okay, we're married, This is it. This is it. Like this is going to be just easy. No, I don't think so. From what you told me about your own relationship, it sounds like it's going to be even more work than before marriage. So what are some of the biggest lessons in the book that you could share with us, especially when it comes to today's topic of, noticing what are the little things you can do every day to nurture love versus just focusing on grand gestures?
Mm-hmm. So, this is our most recent book, the 101 Lessons for All Relationships about conflict management. It's called An End to Arguing. And these are small but meaningful gestures we can make when we find ourselves angry at the other person, irritated, resentful, because they're not going to be Prince Charming or Princess Charming. They're going to be, Ms. Mixed Bag and Mr. Mixed Bag, just like us. And so there are going to be times when they disappoint us. There are going to be times when they frustrate us. There are going to be times maybe they even have different values, or different goals than ours. And that is not a problem. We're attracted to people who are very different than we are. I believe in opposites attract. When we teach, we call it complements attract, that there's some very wise part of ourselves who is only magnetized to somebody who's strong in different areas. It's that drive for mastery that we want to be strong in those areas too. We want to learn from them. But the same things that magnetize us to them in the infatuation stage drive us a little crazy when we leave the infatuation stage. And so to be open to what am I supposed to be learning here? And I'm getting lessons in patience. Maybe I need to be more responsible. Maybe I need to be more assertive in asking about what I need. Maybe I need to be more forgiving. Maybe I need to be more tolerant. Maybe I need to be more committed. And the relationship is going to show us where we need to grow. And relationships are great for that. Any unfinished business, it's going to flush it up to the surface. And the deeper the love, the more stuff is going to come flowing up and show we need to practice here, we need to grow here, we need to cultivate this quality, we need to cultivate this skill. Yeah, particularly about handling the differences well. And when we get accomplished in that area, the relationship tends to be more mellow, not boring. It still can have that dynamic tension, but there's a big space for the differences to float. Where people get in trouble is they just don't say, well, I see it this way. And then the other person says, well, I see it that way. Isn't that interesting? Bringing curiosity and wonder and learning and understanding. And that's a big space. It's when they try to coerce because they're afraid. And they try to coerce the other person to changing their mind or changing their behavior. And people get, they get indignant about that, as well they should. You're trying to change me into being Prince Charming or Princess Charming. I am who I am. If we are loving about the way we deal with our differences, people will take a look and they'll say, you brought that to my attention in such a respectful way that I don't have to fight you about it. I think you're right. I think I was impatient. In fact, now that I reflect on it, I had a hard tone in my voice. I don't want to have a harsh tone in my voice. I love you. What was going on with me then? Well, I felt kind of threatened. I thought you were being kind of controlling and bossy. I've seen some people like that before. And they recognize their own trigger. And they say, okay, we may have a number of conversations about this. This is a sore spot. I'm connecting the dots about where this came from. And that is a healing moment when they start to connect those dots.
Absolutely. I think that's actually really important because as much as we want the relationship to be rainbows and sunshine, it's not going to always be like that. And, learning to be able to argue in the right way. Actually, how funny it sounds. No matter how funny that sounds, I think it's important because, arguments are going to happen. And, I learned about this as well, even though it's so early in the relationship for me and my partner, we kind of started learning about each other's patterns and know when we get triggered and, learn to sort of have healthier discussions rather than arguments. So kind of similar to what you're saying. And there's so much more practice to do, especially from what you shared in terms of the insights that come from the book. I'm sure there's so much more to it. We cannot really capture a whole book in a short answer, right? But I think that's important, and they kind of are related to the lessons to make love last too. So I guess this is a topic that we will have to explore even, in more depth in the future, because you have so many books on it that I think it's just unfair to kind of try to squeeze everything into one conversation.
Yeah. Do you know that when you take the time to explore with your partner, what in the world was just going on then? Then I did stuff. And then I got that edge on my voice. And then I wanted to run for the hills. There's so many people who are conflict avoidant, and they're missing this splendid opportunity to, okay, just keep breathing, stay there, keep looking, because those differences that frighten us and we want to run away, those are the healing and the growing just waiting to happen. You don't want to abort those moments. You want to grow the courage, and the commitment to hang in there. Okay, I can do this. What was going on there? Why were you so triggered? Why did I get so triggered? Let's investigate this. And there's gold there if we keep digging for it.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I think it takes a lot of practice too. It's not like you learn it one time and it applies to all the other times. What I have learned with my partner is we found out about a certain thing that tends to happen. We work on it, and then we thought it was fine. And then we learned that it can emerge in another way about a certain argument that we tend to have. And so there's so many different ways to kind of learn the pattern and also deal with new things that might come up.
And a lot of it is just the fear that we keep cycling through it until we understand it better. And we had the same fight over and over in our early years, that I have my greatest fears being abandoned. And I was afraid he was going to leave. If I tell him how unhappy I am with that, and he's going to just say, you're too much trouble. And I was activating his greatest fear, which was being controlled. And a lot of people have a lot of fears about being controlled. And I think there are just as many people who have big fears about being abandoned. Those aren't the only two, but they're commonplace. And those kind of people tend to get together with each other. And so you keep activating that until you have a deeper understanding of it. And when my husband could tell me, no, I want you to be honest with me. I welcome your honesty. Even if it makes me feel uncomfortable, I want us to have an honest relationship. And if I ever was going to leave you, it was about being conflict avoidant and covering up and letting the incompletions mount up. It wouldn't be about being honest with me, even if it's difficult for us. And I needed to hear that I could open up and I could be myself and I could tell the truth about, when it wasn't all sweet strawberry slush and roses. It wasn't always beautiful. And he needed to know that I didn't want to control him, but that I didn't really know exactly what it looked like not to have a domination and submission relationship, because I didn't see that when I was growing up, nor did he. And that we had to find other couples to model for us who shared power well so we could learn how to do that. And I said, I don't want power over you. I want power with you. I want us to both feel powerful. We won't get all of our needs met, but we can get a lot of them met, most of them met, and we can thrive together. And when we threw in our commitments, joined up our commitments, that's when things started to really move.
That's amazing. Well, thank you for sharing that. And as I said, we're going to have so much more to learn from you and Charlie, and hopefully we'll have the next conversation with Charlie soon. But now I think it's time to have a little chat about something more practical for people to take home today. We've covered a lot of insights from your work and your different books. And so I think now let's talk about one thing. And this is where we talk about practice and habits. So let's talk about one thing that you would recommend to couples or people that are in, romantic relationships or would like to get into romantic relationships, so they can try, when applicable, something that would cultivate their everyday happiness, and it would focus more on the little things that matter rather than the grand gestures.
Checking in with self. What's going on with me? How's my body? What's my thoughts in my mind? What are the feelings around my heart space? And checking in to tell yourself the truth. First, you need to have an intimate relationship with yourself, and then regular check-ins with your beloved. Whether that's a friend, or whether that's a romantic partner, whether that's your lover. And do it regularly. Make it a habit. And particularly if it feels a little edgy, I don't know if I want to share that. See if you can very gently, respectfully, but firmly press the edge of your comfort zone and see if you could share that edgy thing. Because it's that edge, where we're getting real with each other, that authentic, vulnerable relating, where the depth of the connection comes. And over time, when you're accepted, not judged for, you think that's stupid, you want that, oh, that's crazy. When you get received, you start to feel free. Not just free to do anything you want to do, but free to be who you are, free to be yourself. And that's an incredible gift that the high-functioning couples give to each other.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. I think it's good. And I love that you mentioned, it's not just about checking in with the other person, but it's also about checking in with yourself too, because we got to know where we're at. And I think having that level of self-awareness is important, especially going back to that point that you mentioned earlier about argument. A lot of the time, this is what I was just talking about this to my colleague earlier before we started the podcast. I was like, I was in an argument because I was just lashing out at my partner for something that I was experiencing. It is nothing that he was doing. It was just because of what I was going through, and I didn't recognize that was what was bothering me. And so instead of sharing, I ended up lashing out at them, and that's unfair.
It's unfair, and it will keep the relationship arrested at a lesser level of development.
Absolutely.
When you rise up to that level of responsibility and you recognize, like you did, I've got some warring factions inside myself. There's some place where I'm not peaceful inside myself. I've got this desire, but I've got a conflicting desire. Do you know? And when we are more at peace inside ourselves, lo and behold, there's more peace in our relationship. When we have more areas where we're conflicted and confused and upset and tensed up as an individual, it tends, the intrapersonal conflict becomes interpersonal conflict. And we project that all over the other person, and it's not really fair.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I was learning that over the weekend, and now we're having this discussion about the same topic. It's just a great reminder, because it's a constant learning journey too. We have this practice that you just recommended to us, and we're going to learn from it every single time. And I think taking that time to really think about relationship and where you're standing in your own life to kind of make it work is important, because it's not about one thing or the other. When you're in a partnership, it's kind of everything is interrelated, and it's really important and extra important to have that self-awareness as well as understanding of the relationship and where it's standing, so you can cultivate and make the love last longer. So thank you for sharing that. And now we're at open mic, and I know you've got something you would like to share with our audience. So take it away, Linda.
So I really wish that more people would have an eagerness, to become proficient in relationship. I always am trying to appeal to the visionary in the person, that they uncover the ambition that they have, not just to have an okay, acceptable relationship, but to have a great one. We call that going for the gold. To have enough self-esteem and to have enough self-confidence that you deserve to have a golden relationship, and then commit themselves to it, to come from whatever it takes. If you're already in a pair, there's usually one that has more ambition about driving the relationship up to the higher thrive zone. More responsibility rests with the person that's got the drive. They need to take more responsibility. They need to be dreaming up the ideas. I was the one in the early part of our relationship who signed us up for the relationship workshops that would get all the relationship books and read the best passages out of the books to Charlie. It took time, because he was so career focused for so long, till he saw that he was getting so much out of the relationship when he tooled up, when he filed down some of his rough edges, that he was sometimes a little bit too authoritarian, not authoritative, authoritarian. He was sometimes a little too bossy. He was sometimes a little too arrogant. He was a little too domineering. And I, needed to get bolder and grow a pair and assert myself and really stand in my leadership. But if people could only grasp how much is available, not for the special elite, for us ordinary people, if we're willing to put the time and effort in. This is not rocket science. It's just a skill set, just like if you were learning to speak a foreign language or to play a musical instrument or become accomplished in your career. You put the time and effort, you get the people who are ahead of you in the graduating class ahead of you to teach you, you avail yourself of the supports that are out there, and then you become a champion. It's doable. I wish people would set their sights high.
Absolutely. I think that's a powerful message, and I think it's something I've been thinking about a lot too, because most of us just get into relationships thinking that we'll figure it out along the way. But in fact, now more than ever, I think it's extra important to learn about how relationships actually work and what is required. It's kind of like you go to school or university and you learn about particular subjects to do something for your career, let's say. And that, okay, there are these modules, there are these lessons that you need to know and grasp to be able to deal with such a so-and-so situation. And then you have your work experience. I like to think of it as quite similar to relationships. Nobody teaches us about relationships, but if we approach it in the same way that we would approach things like how we progress in life with, studies, with career, it would really help us. Because if we come into the relationship with pretty much no knowledge, no tools, and just based on our observation or past experiences, and a lot of us, we have childhood trauma too, that's not going to be a healthy start to the relationship or even the healthy way to approach it in the long term. And things might just repeat themselves over and over. And so I think that message of yours is it's quite, relatable and related to what I have been thinking about a lot. And I think it's important for all of us to do that. And going right back to the beginning of the podcast, that's going to help us with our well-being, our health, our happiness, and so much more. And so relationships are work. They are not just there for you to enjoy and to kind of think that, it's going to fix all your problems and so much more. I think people have so many things they say about relationships. This show is not about that per se. We do have a separate show about relationships called L.C.S.W. if our audience want to check that out. And we have your podcast if our audience would like to check that out as well. So I think it's been great learning, and there's a lot of lessons, and I think it's unfair to kind of pack them all in one episode. So I'm excited to also talk to Charlie about another angle perhaps. And really thank you so much, Linda, for joining us today. I learned a lot from you, and now I'm curious. I'm going to have to read your books as well.
Great. I enjoyed our interview, and thank you for the penetrating questions. It gave me a chance to be a jumping off place to make some of the points that I wanted to make, and I enjoyed myself.
That's great to hear. Thank you. You have been listening to Sero Boost, the Happiness Science Insights podcast produced by the Happiness Science Labs, a division of LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. More episodes are available from 10 life management perspectives and can be found by searching LMSL on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and other podcasting apps available on your devices. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate, share, and subscribe to our channel so that other people can find it and we can continue to provide quality content. More of our work can be found on our website, ha.lmsl.net, where you can join our movement. I'm Lu Ngo. Thanks for tuning in.